from the willfully ignorant, the knowledge you won't get none. But don't get it twisted, I too was dumb and then some. Support a politician, sit back and then twiddle his thumbs, not understanding that you got your close and trust. They have no desire to save you. It's not because the folks serving us. It's not because we don't have the right people in office. It's not because a certain bracket is just to line left. It's not because y'all folks don't understand the process. Yo, this is all just a game, bro. Y'all support your bronies and it works well, did it so? Follow the millions to a downtown. Word for the crowd till they exhaust the same thing. Then you support the lesser of the evil bankers, but it just repeats and we revisit this 4 years later. The state itself is based on filth and can't be fixed. So realize you own yourself and no one else. I do speak cordially, not metaphorically. I like to speak informally with honesty, yet horribly. Y'all often like to appeal to all of the authority. I step ahead of y'all, that's the reason I brought my bro with me. Right on the promises, the promises is the roller, so I knew I better run ruling over myself, no lie, no I know. But all the rest is telling y'all of me and us, and every possible thing that every person is face. There was no way of stepping with bitch shooting on the present. Slavery's not the presence of orders of what we're lacking. Right above me the cost, no matter your mental boss. Something's missing, you're the driven, just how they are the boss. And let me give a shout out to the people, whoa. Rolling your balls, government when it's the thing it's all. You like it as insane, as the rest of authority. Just stay in shackles, so as long you get along the ledge. Everything is not trendy, and everything things to say. That you are not insane. Let the people go with me.
Happy New Year, everybody. This is Jacob Daniel. This is the Daniel 3 podcast. It's good to be back after a little hiatus for the holidays. Started a little late today because my computer decided that, it had a nice break from doing podcasting, and so none of my apps were going to work right. The microphone wasn't going to work. The camera wasn't going to work. And then the StreamYard decided that it wasn't going to work. So, it's all good. It's a new year. So this is the first episode of the new year, and I'm excited for the guests that I have coming on and the topic that we are going to discuss. I'm going to bring them on right now and just skip with any of the fancy formalities and intros. So this is my friend Torrent from Don't Tread on Philly and the LP Mises Caucus out there in Philly, representing our home state of Pennsylvania. How you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm all things considered, doing pretty good. It's been a crazy, chaotic start to the new year. Lots of stuff went on in the month of December, but hey, I guess we're rolling over here. So,
yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I just at this point, I feel like since 2020, every month feels like a year worth of stuff happens.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's just, and you just think someone brings up something, and you're like, well, that happened a while ago. They're like, no, that was last week. What?
Or you
But
say something, or you say, "Oh, so that feels like it happened last week." And no, nope, that was 18 months ago. Like, oh shoot.
yeah, right. Yeah, last week, like when we were able to, go to, like a movie theater or sit down in a restaurant without wearing a mask. I mean, for the most part around here, things, at least where I live in PA, things have kind of normalized. Although it's like every once in a while, like today, I walked into a place, a hardware store, just to get a couple of fuses, and I didn't see the sign, and I walked in, and the guy was like, "Are you double vac?" He actually asked, "Are you double vaccinated?" I was like, what? He was
Seriously?
like, yeah, he was like, you have to wear a mask if you're not double. Everyone here has been vaccinated and boosted at least once. Should be double vaccinated or wear a mask. I just turned around and left. We got a few. Went down to the next hardware store down the street to get the fuse that I needed. So I was just like,
Ugh.
but for the most part, people around here have been they got the shits of it after a couple months and have not been listening to stuff. But that's been my experience in most of PA. But I guess I don't know. I guess we'll get into how well my brothers over in Eastern PA are faring. But this is your first time on my show, so I wanted to start out maybe just give you a chance to introduce yourself and maybe just explain how you became a libertarian and why you hate yourself and have decided to get involved in politics and the crazy like masochistic especially like intra politics of like joining the Mises Caucus and all that. So I mean, I feel like all of us are gluttons for punishment or something. But yeah,
Yeah, a little
explain that
bit.
journey and how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, so I'm touring. I live in Philadelphia. I've only been about in Philadelphia for about 5 years. Let's see here. I grew up very religiously conservative. Not non-denominational churches. I was just very much your typical conservative. I remember, what was it, September 11th, 2001. I was in seventh grade, still remember everything happening, and got really pumped up, patriotic about how all that stuff went down. Was just sort of a blind religious conservative for a lot of my life. And then after graduating from college, I actually was for better or worse, a Southern Baptist missionary, and I spent some time in Southeast Asia, and I think my politics just really got blown up, at least in terms of a lot of social conservative stuff, and as well as cultural things. I think I'd still held a lot of economic values that were in line with conservatism and that sort of thing, but really just completely and outright rejected the GOP at that point, and considered myself pretty politically homeless for the better part of the next 10 years. And then I don't know, got started listening to some stuff last summer. Things were going down here in Philly. I was pretty much locked in my house alone for a couple of months, and then we had the BLM riots, and we're having these curfews, and I don't know if there's going to be a bunch of rioters running down the streets in my neighborhood at some point. I have no idea like what's going on, and yeah, politics was at the top of everybody's mind last summer. And I started going down some rabbit holes, and as probably most libertarians do. And I think I was listening to maybe Brett Weinstein at first, and then somehow YouTube told me to go listen to Tim Pool. And I think the second episode of Tim Pool I ever listened to was Michael Malice. And then I think the third was Maj Toure, and I started listening to Malice pretty heavily. You got introduced me to Dave Smith, and then I'm like, yeah, these guys make sense. They pretty
Yeah.
much align with where I'm sitting these days. And then I
What's
think,
funny is that list of three people, like Dave Smith is the most soft spoken, I think.
oh yeah, oh yeah, he really is.
I was like
He's the
Michael
most measured.
Malice, right? Like Michael Malice and Maj. It's like, well, the two of the most soft spoken introductions to Austrian libertarianism you could ask for, right? I mean,
Oh yeah. Yeah, they don't pull any punches. Let's just put it that way. I mean,
they make Dave look so reasonable because they're just like insane and like total assholes, and Dave's like, well, I'm just half an asshole, so
yeah, pretty much. But yeah, so I've been listening to those guys for like a year, and I'm not one to want to get involved in politics. I do not like the drama. I don't like the bickering, the maneuvering, which means I really hate LPPA.
What? You don't like 4-hour long board meetings where everyone's yelling at each other and cussing each other out, and then ensuing signal chats and Facebook groups where we yell at each other more. I mean, I love it. I mean, it's like I but I actually blame those things on the fact that like it's harder to get a hold of me now, and people are like, "Oh, you're some big time podcaster. You think you get back to me?" It's like, no, I just have everything on mute because if I
Yeah,
didn't have it on mute, my phone would just like my battery would die from just the notifications going off
yeah,
because y'all don't
yeah.
ever stop.
I'm starting to learn that here the last few weeks, and no, the LPPA I think is it's the LPPA, and
I actually love
we're
most people in the
a lot of
LPPA.
them
There's
are
a
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've made some really good friends this past year. Bonnie, Joel, Tim McMaster. I mean, there's a lot of good guys, and even some people that don't always see eye to eye on things, but like
Oh yeah.
they're great
Yeah.
libertarians, and I kind of view us all as fellow travelers, even if they're not all in the Mises Caucus. It's
Oh yeah.
I'm not a
Absolutely.
I'm not a political tribalist. I'm just a don't be a shitty personist, I guess, right? Like just be a good person and a good libertarian. I don't think that's a pretty low bar.
Yeah.
Most people meet it.
Yeah, I mean that's how I am too. The way I describe it to people is, my principles have led me to the Libertarian Party and to the Mises Caucus. Um, the Mises Caucus, Libertarian Party don't define my principles,
Right.
and most of the people in the LPPA and elsewhere, I feel like fit along with those principles, whether or not we agree with everything, agree on everything or not. So. Um, yeah, it was really Dave Smith and Malice talking this summer, and I think they were talking about some of the drama in the LP in general, and it's just like I should really try to get involved. I don't know if anybody is here in Philly. I feel like I'm on an island. Let me just sign up and see
Only
what
like
the heck's going
80% of
on.
the only 80% of the party is in.
Yeah,
I feel like most of the LPPA and also like the Pennsylvania Mises Caucus is like Eastern PA, and then there's like a small bit in the West, and I'm in the middle, just like
yeah,
alone. There's like 5 of us out here. I mean, there's more. There's actually now like 10 or 20 of us, but compared to y'all, I mean, it's like you guys have probably have at least like 30 or 40 active people out there.
yeah. The LP Philly meetings are usually pretty small. I think one of the things that I'm trying to do, I'm now the somehow, after only being involved with the Mises and the LP for 3 months, somehow I'm suddenly county organizer for Philly. And so one of our goals is to try to get people a little bit more involved on that side of things. And really, my main focus is like I said, I really I love political philosophy. I hate the politics and the infighting. If I could
Yeah.
just stay out of that as much as possible, I would love to. Um, what I really love is culture. I love liberty culture. I love freedom. I love just cool things in general. Right now I'm sitting in my basement where I built my own, personal like brewery slash bar. Um, who knew I was actually going to need this? But apparently there. I don't know if this is true, but there are rumors going around that at one point in the city of Philadelphia, you did not need to show a vaccine card to get into a bar. Uh, I don't know.
That sounds
Um,
crazy. I mean, what's next? They think that people can walk across the street without a armed escort. I mean, this is the tyranny of freedom, if you ask me.
so yeah. So yeah, who knew? When I finished building this summer, I was actually, there's part of me that was like, gosh, I wish I would have done this like a year or two ago, and it would have been really cool, like when all the lockdowns were going on, to be like, hey, come over to my place. I brewed some beer. You want to hang out? And so there's part of me that had this a little bit of this sort of prideful masochism or something that was like, um, I wish I could have this in cool times. And then now, yeah, those really weird screwed up times are here. And
I
this
know.
is might be one of the only bars in the city that I can legally have a drink in at the moment.
Yeah, so how is it over there? And I mean, like, again, my experience over here in my part of PA is people are, for the most part, again, the isolated pockets of insanity, but for the most part, people have just kind of like tried to get back to some kind of something resembling normal. Although like places are open, but they're like there's like no one working. Like I tried going to Olive Garden over the weekend, and at first I was upset because I thought they were not like, they were like there was, like, nobody there. We walked in, they're like, "Oh, it's gonna be an hour wait." I was like, "There's nobody here." I was like, "Oh, yeah." I was like, "They probably have dumb COVID rules, like, gotta keep everyone spaced apart." And the person overheard me and said, "No, we just don't have, like, enough servers." I was like, "Oh, that sucks." So, a little bit of that. But how is it over in Philly? I mean, is it, and what's that experience been like? And, I guess, that'll be a good transition into, what you've started to do now.
Yeah, Philly's been, kind of a little bit of a weird place. As it probably always is. It's been, I think, for a long time, it's been weird in very cool ways. But yeah, it's been weird in not so cool ways recently. I mean, I think early on we had like a mask mandate for being outdoors. And, really what the mandate was if you can't keep 6 feet distance, you have to wear a mask outdoors. Yet, I kind of understood that. So I'd take my dog for a walk. And of course, I didn't have a mask on, but you'd still have people looking at you like you were Satan himself walking down the street without a mask on. And that's been kind of the feeling for in Philly overall. Now, Philly's an interesting city because it's really, it's a city of very different neighborhoods. And depending on where you go, there are more, some people will take the COVID stuff way more seriously um, than in other places. You can go to a restaurant on Passyunk Ave or Center City or South Street, and they've had, vaccine required signs up for months. Or you could go to, a bar tucked away in a corner in a neighborhood, and they just don't care and still won't care. Um, you just can't, say who it is because then they'll send out the Fed boys on them or something. But it's interesting. My summation, and we can definitely talk about what we're doing here a little bit later. But my summation and some of the work we've been doing in the outreach and whatnot is that yeah, there is a very very loud, very powerful minority here that is super pro COVID anything, mask, vaccine, whatever. They control the politics in the city. They run it. A lot of people go along with it. What I'm seeing out on the streets here and with, normal everyday people is that people are pissed off. They are not okay with what's going on. They're not down with it. I have reason to believe that with and this is all anecdotal, just based on people that I'm meeting in various places. I mean, I don't think the vaccine percentages that they say are out here in Philly are real. Just because, when a guy tells me that he's unvaccinated and he leads a construction crew of 40 people and they're all unvaccinated, it's like, well, what are the odds of that if if these numbers are real?
Yeah, I mean, I think I already had a healthy skepticism of the mainstream narrative and use of statistics before all this, and all this has done is like reaffirm everything I ever thought. I mean, statistics are just so like unbelievably like subjective and easily manipulated, and and it's like, and even like all these studies on whether it's like the effectiveness of the vaccines or how many people are taking them, and it's just like it's just for one, it's a lot of the things are done based on like a univariable analysis, which is like, there's always other explanations and controls that the study doesn't account for. And then two, there's always like a bias, I think, with a lot of these studies where like whether it's intentional or even it can just be unconscious, where they will poll the people that they think are the most likely to give them the outcome that they want that
Yeah.
study or that poll to give.
Yep.
And so it's just, again, and I'm not anti-science, whatever the heck that means. I'm just like I'm pro actual science, which means being rigorous and skeptical and, if you have a hypothesis, test it, and if it's confirmed, still test it again and try to disprove your hypothesis. Like that's actual science, not just like I had this preconceived belief. I will now do tests and only acknowledge the ones that confirm my pre-existing belief. Like that, that's not scientific at all. And yeah, I'm very skeptical of the reports of how many people are being have been vaccinated. Even so, going as far as I wonder, like when people are being asked these things, like or when they're collecting this data, like are they collecting this and going off of reports from places that administer them? Is it self-reported? Like you got to dig into this. Are people when people are put on the spot? Are they going to be 100% truthful? You know what I mean? Like it's um even I've been put on the spot sometimes, and it's I'll go in. Some places have like the signs up where they're like, "Oh, if you're vaccinated, no mask." And for the most part, people are chill and just like it's kind of a don't ask, don't tell thing. But then when people ask, it's like, uh, you know, do I lie? Do I tell the truth? It's like, what do you do? And to avoid the conflict, it's easier to just lie sometimes. Or I just kind of nod along and I just kind of like it's not your business, so whatever. But yeah. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
my opinion is a lot like yours, where I feel like there's a lot of people that are fed up with this, but I feel like they need somebody or some group of people to stand up and give them the courage to do the same. This is why I stopped wearing masks early on, because early
Yep.
on, like I'm not a very contrary to what people might think about me, I'm not the most competitive person in the world. Like when it comes to libertarian theory and arguing online, I mean, I think that we all do that. But
Yep.
when I'm like in real life, person to person, I don't like conflict. I like getting along with people. And for the most part, it's like at the beginning when people were when the mask mandates or recommendations came out. If I went to a store, they asked me to wear a mask, I would just put it on. So I was like, I don't want to get into a fight. I don't want to you know, cause a ruckus.
Yeah.
It's annoying. I don't agree with it, but I just want to go about my day and not and path of least resistance, I guess. But after a while, when I just realized that like this wasn't going away, I also realized that the mask wearing was getting heavily normalized, and I was like, this is a problem. And if there aren't people who are pushing to get back to normal, nobody's going to go, this is going to become, something that children are going to be raised in a generation of children raised in a society where for years people are wearing masks and they think that's just like part of everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to tell my wife, I'm going to stop wearing the mask. And she's going to get in trouble. I was like, yeah, but you know what? Like if I stop wearing it, that gives maybe somebody else the courage. Like it just, you go in, and that's how I was. I'd go into a store and be like, if I can find one person not wearing a mask, it
Yep.
makes me feel better about not wearing my mask. And I feel like with these vaccine mandates, it's kind of the same thing, but that's harder. Like it's easy to show people you're not wearing a mask when you go out in public. It's a little bit harder to go out and advertise in a non-creepy way that I've not been jabbed. So,
Yeah.
um, but we need to normalize that. And so I think talk about I guess like the efforts you're doing now, I guess to sort of like maybe rally the people of Philly that you think are getting fed up with this to maybe like start pushing back against this stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's the goal. And I think a lot of your story and what you just talked about has kind of been my same thing. Almost the exact same progression too. Um, I think what I'm really seeing is, yeah, it might not be a majority, but I don't think it's certainly not a minority because I don't think there is a majority in this whole thing. I think it's quite possibly a plurality of people here in Philly are pissed off. The issue is almost all of them think they're alone. And Maj will call media the most effective devil in America. And that's exactly what it is in terms of this. I mean, I was watching the college bowl games on Saturday, and I think I was watching Notre Dame and Oklahoma State, and one of the commercials was the Big 12 advertising the vaccine. You've got all of these healthy college athletes, like prime physical condition, probably the last who actually scientifically need to take these vaccines, saying, do the right thing, join us. So what it is, even if you have like a large number of people, even if it was an actual majority, you're sitting in, you're watching this messaging on your TV saying, take it. If you don't, you're a bad person. And it just convinces everybody they're alone. So what we've been doing with, Don't Tread on Philly is just putting the word out there that no, you're not alone. I think I mentioned earlier that I'm the county organizer for LPMC Philly, and I had started a couple of weeks before these mandates, and I had just started a Twitter account for LPMC Philly. I kind of came up with this tagline. I wanted something cool. I was talking about culture. I wanted something kind of culturally cool to like let's make freedom cool again. And so I said, let's take the Gadsden flag, let's change it up a little bit. Let's say don't tread on Philly. And so that was going to be my whole thing for Philly Mises was don't tread on Philly. And then a week later, we get these mandates coming down, and myself, and a couple others in the area from the caucus and the LP got together. We're like, we got to do something. We got to start a group, get a website going. I'm like, well, let me see if don'ttreadonphilly.com is still available. Uh, so I go on GoDaddy, go pull it up, bang, it's there. So I said, yeah, we got to get this. We got to start a group, start something, start connecting with people. So our whole goal really has been outreach and connecting with folks in the city and saying, really, we don't want to be an anti-vaccine group. Um, like you, I'm a science guy. I'm a stats nerd. I studied stats in college. My current job revolves around a lot of analytics and that sort of thing. So I don't ever want to make the statement that vaccines are bad, don't do it, because I think there's always nuance to any of these arguments. And so even if these vaccines were just absolutely amazing and they stopped transmission, they stopped did all the things that they said they were supposed to do at the beginning that they're now walking back publicly, like there's still nuance and there's still reason why all of this should be choice and that people shouldn't be demonized over choosing not to get vaccinated. And that's what's happening in Philly. Like it's getting vile, like bad. Um, there's a restaurant in Fishtown that is fairly popular. I've never been. Maj says their food isn't any good, so I'll trust him on that and believe that I'm not missing out. But they put up a sign that was like, it was like no vax, no service or something. And they belligerently said yesterday that like today's the mandate's going into effect. And if you disagree with us, you can go around out back to the kitchen door behind the restaurant. I'm like, this is the same garbage that they said to, African Americans back before the civil rights movement. And, I understand that there's not the history and all this stuff built up, and I understand that vaccination is not a it's not a immutable characteristic, but hate is hate, bigotry is bigotry. And you're seeing some disgusting stuff. I mean, we were out at the Mummers Parade on Sunday, passing out literature and signs, and I mean, we had some guy telling us we were murderers. Like this isn't cool. And so, I mean, that's how you beat people into fear. You beat people into isolation. You make them afraid to speak up, and then the powers that be, this very small vocal minority. I mean, we're talking maybe 10%. The rest are just either just going along with it because they think it's the right thing to do, or they just don't care. that's how they get power. And so what we're trying to do is just go out and say, people, hey, doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not, doesn't matter what you believe about all of this. This is violating choice. It's violating freedom. Hey, if you agree with that, you're not alone. Come join us.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And yeah, there's something about like that, I mean, on one hand, it's toxic and in my opinion evil, the kind of like I guess like almost like anti-human sort of rhetoric that the opposition uses to like attack people that don't comply. But there's something effective about that, which is
Oh
like,
yeah.
like one of my favorite passages in the Bible is like when Jesus talks about like be hot or cold. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out. And but there's something to that where it's like the opposition, and in this case the opposition is primarily the left, and the left has been good at throughout the years at like understanding that like being lukewarm doesn't get anything done. But if they decide to be incredibly like, even if it's like insane, they're still pushing people in the direction they want to go, because it's like they're planting those, like, I mean, in the Christian sense we would talk about like planting seeds of faith or planting seeds of compassion and kindness. Well, they're planting seeds that are like, it's almost like, I mean, ironically it's almost more like a virus, you know what I mean? Like they're planting things that like, hurt a person's soul and make them feel
Yeah.
more timid and more afraid and more alone. And you can't, and it's tough. Like we're in this position where I agree with you. There's a lot of nuance to the conversation, but a lot of time it feels like it can be easy when you're hit with such an extreme that we feel like we want to attack back with like the equal opposite
Yeah.
extreme, and
Yeah.
that's almost like physics at play, right? Like it's
Yep.
just that's just what feels natural. But I think what's actually effective is not to just meet that might with might, but rather it's kind of like we have to uh like I guess sort of like work around their expectations, and we have to respond in a way that makes people um it's kind of like a glitch in the matrix kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like we have to respond in a way that's off script. It's kind of like what Tom Woods says, like, go off that index card of 3 by 5 allowable opinion. And it's
Yep.
like when we go out there, and we don't have to be even, we don't have to be inflammatory, we don't have to be rude, we don't have to be assholes about it. We just need to go off script and actually just tell the truth, because I think the truth is actually like very foreign to the political conversation in our society right now. I think it's why voices like Dave Smith and guys like Maj and guys like Malice, even guys like Spike Cohen, I think are doing an amazing job at growing their platform and their voice. And the reason why they attract people is because they've just gotten really good at like telling the truth in a way that, I mean, sometimes is inflammatory, because sometimes the truth is inflammatory. But I think the goal is always to uh not to seek to be provocative, but not to be afraid to be provocative if the truth is provocative. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of the balance that we have to play. And I think people, they're attracted to that kind of genuineness. And so what have your experiences been so far? And what are the things that you've done? I think you guys just had an event just this past weekend. So maybe talk about some of the successes you've had, and the things that you guys have been able to start doing.
Yeah, the main thing has just been doing a lot of outreach. We've been out to City Hall several times, just passing out flyers. Went down to the Eagles game a week or two ago and just were talking to people. We honestly are the response is overwhelmingly positive. It's probably like 85-15 positive and negative. It's incredible. And this past Sunday, we were doing kind of a lead up to an initial protest of the Philadelphia Mummers Parade, and it got postponed. It's normally on New Year's Day, but it got postponed because of the weather on New Year's Day. And so it really dampened the crowds, dampened the ability for attendance of the protest. Um, we had our own police detail and people taking all of our pictures and in case something went crazy, which it never was. We were just going down there at a good time. What a really the cool thing it turned into on Sunday was like a protest with the mummers. The mummers are controversial figures here in Philly. It's one of the biggest working class traditions in the city, and I think a lot of it is really good. But there's some really provocative things about them as well. The good thing for us is that, most of them are like a lot of them are like South Philly working class folks. They really dug that "Don't tread on Philly" message, and a lot of them agreed. Hey, these mandates are they're racist. They're wrong. They're not good. Um, we had only a limited number who could show up because of the change in dates, but we were able to go down there with 1,200 signs, pass out about 500 of them. Most of them went to the mummers themselves. We'd stand on the side of the street, and a mummers brigade would walk past, and they just start ripping these signs out of our hands and like holding them up. It was so cool. We got some pictures on social media of some of them holding them up. I'm getting messages on Instagram all the time from like photographers that were like, "This was awesome. This is so cool. Here's a picture that we got." Uh, yeah, it's been this overwhelmingly positive. Hey, we agree. We don't think these mandates are good. There are so many other bad things going on in the city right now too. Whether it be the murder rate, I think we set a record for homicides in 2021. Just terrible. So much else is going on, and people are just so fed up because
Well,
I
and
I hate it. Somebody on Facebook today was like, "Well, let Philly burn. Like this, they did this to themselves." Like, no, Philly's cool. We got to figure out a way to cut off this cancer and make it cool again.
yeah, I mean, there's people there. I mean, there's people, there's families. I mean, it's, yeah, and it's, I don't know. I mean, I had something I was gonna say, and then you went on that good tangent. Now I just lost it.
It's all right.
The um, yeah, I mean, there's something about what's going on that's especially ironic that the left is championing this because, like, I mean, for one, there's
Oh
the
yeah,
irony of like, you don't need driver's licenses to vote, but you need a vaccine card to like,
yeah,
leave your house and do basic things. But it goes deeper than that. Like all those problems that you just brought up, like the crime, the homicides, the I'm sure there's a problem of poverty and all that. These lockdowns cannot have done anything to help at all. And these are human lives being
yeah,
destroyed. I mean, human lives that are being put on hold, um, and the only people benefiting from it are like actually like the people at the top. I mean,
yeah,
like in the business world, I remember hearing so many examples of people of businesses that were taking advantage of all that stimulus money and like taking out like huge loans that they didn't actually qualify for, but like they were exploiting these loopholes and stuff. And like it
yeah,
was all going to these huge big businesses that didn't actually need the money, whereas like small mom and pop shops were like, basically screwed. And people weren't, people were on one hand, people had their livelihoods destroyed. On the other hand, people were like neutered. People were like given free handouts and it destroyed, further
yep.
destroyed the already screwed up incentive structures of our economy to where now people don't want to work. And so it's handicapped them. And it's just, yeah, I mean, and it's just like, I don't think any of us are calloused towards this virus. I
No,
am especially not callous towards it because I don't know how much you follow like my stuff on my personal Facebook, but
I
like,
saw it. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, like my dad almost died from COVID.
yeah,
Died. He actually technically died twice and got brought back. His life is never going to be the same. I
yeah,
mean, the doctors are his prognosis is like it might take 3 to 6 months for him to maybe get back to his former self, or he might have some permanent
mm,
damage that he's going to live with the rest of his life,
yeah,
both in his lungs and his body, possibly even neurologically.
yeah.
So, but another story I've told a lot in my podcast is I went through a similar thing with my daughter back in early 2019 when sorry 2018 wait, was it? Okay, now time is again. This is where time
Yeah.
is the timeline's starting to make less and less sense. But I
COVID brain fog.
yeah, no, it was 2019. She was 1.5. So it was early 20. It was Valentine's Day 2019. She got sick and ended up in the hospital and almost died
Mm,
from a stomach virus. A
yeah.
regular old plain Jane stomach virus that went through like our local church community.
Hmm.
Everyone got it. All my kids got it. My wife and I had it. It was like one of those like 24-hour bugs where
Hmm.
you want to die because you can't stop throwing up. and um and then we all got better, but then the virus mutated in her and she started
Mm,
having these nonstop seizures and almost died and was in the hospital for like 3-4 weeks. And she still has some lingering side effects from that whole
yeah.
ordeal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, Viruses, sickness, disease, all this stuff has always existed.
Yeah.
And, things are going to ebb and flow. There's going to be times where things are worse and times where they're better. And I think for the most part, we have to get back to a place where we just acknowledge that life is this fragile thing and that all the best that any of us can do is take personal responsibility for our own safety and to try to be considerate of others. Um, but we have to push back against this regime that has just used this fear of dying or of getting sick and having ramifications to take away our essential liberties. Because
Yeah.
tell you one thing, it is possible to get COVID and die. It's
Yep.
possible to get COVID and have lingering side effects. But it's also possible a lot of people get over it and aren't worse for the wear. But what universally is always destructive to people's lives is when you take away liberty.
Yeah.
Always. It's
Yeah.
it's it's not like, oh, sometimes authoritarianism works out.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you give government power, they use it for good. It's like, no.
Never.
No. Um, so I
Yeah.
just, so it's yeah, we have to I think be more bold to push back against this stuff and not let the naysayers and the shamers keep us down.
Yeah.
This is definitely a fight that's worth fighting, and I think there's something I've been to Philly a few times. I remember my first time to Philly. My dad took me to the Pats and Geno's and
Yeah.
had me try both and I disappointed my dad that day because I was a Pats fan. He's like, he's a Geno's fan, and he's like,
I've
no
never
son of
had
mine.
either.
Never had either, yeah. But and there's something, I went out there with my kids and like and visited the museums. There's a lot of like rich history there with the
Yeah.
American Revolution and stuff. Um, I remember going through that museum, little personal anecdote here, through one of the museums, and like they had this like documentary, one of those things you sit on, like in that like big observatory room where like this big
Hmm.
interactive thing, going over like the founding fathers and the history of this country and this part of the state and stuff and the things that people believed, and I started tearing up. Like, I
Yeah.
was just like, "What has happened to her?" I was like,
Yeah.
"Listen, I don't know where you exactly fall in the political spectrum. Like, I'm still libertarian. I'm basically like full blown anarcho-capitalist. Like, bring it all down. That's how far I go with it.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of fellow travelers who are more minarchists, constitutionalists, and stuff. But even though I'm an anarchist, I mean, that's my podcast name is Biblical Anarchy. That couldn't have
Yeah.
been a surprise. Um, but as much as I'm an anarchist, I have a deep respect for the founding of this country,
Oh
and I have a
yeah.
deep respect for the principles that the Declaration of Independence, uh, laid out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just I don't know. There's just something deeply depressing about really what's going on across the whole country. But then like to see a place like Philly that's got that legacy behind it.
Yeah.
It deserves better, and I think it's a pivotal ground to try to start to especially focus on. And
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know, a bit of a rant there, but
Yeah.
just wanted to get my thoughts out and stuff. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you guys got coming down the pipeline that you that maybe you want to talk about, and like ways that if there's people that are in the surrounding areas, that they can, maybe start to think about getting plugged in and
Yeah.
hear what you're doing.
So the number one thing is check out our website, don'ttreadonphilly.com. It's got the links to everything. Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, Instagram, Signal, Discord. Um, yeah, it's got all those links. Plus, it's got, we've got an official website with some information on it. It houses all of our events. We're going to be doing another outreach at the Eagles game on Saturday. We're going to try to join in with the march on DC coming up. And one of the coolest things that we just did, and this might be a little bit of a tangent, but it goes along with what you were just talking about. We got connected to other groups. We're not the only ones out there. We have over 1,200 people in our Facebook group now, and it's growing rapidly. It's been like 500 the last day. But the cool thing is we've gotten connected to a lot of other groups. Just a sort of an independent, concerned citizen hosted a freedom happy hour last week at a pretty freedom oriented bar in the city. And it was one of those cool things. Like I was there, Mike Heiss was there, Mark Bazzacco, Maj was there. It was one of those things where we're sitting around in this room, and I'm having this thought, and it's really interesting. I'm like, this, like, it was bars and pubs like this where they planned the American Revolution in this city. And it was like, this has this kind of feeling about it. And I'm actually like you. I'm at this point, I'm like a full-blown Michael Malice anarchist without qualification. Uh, but honestly, the Declaration of Independence is one of the most beautiful. It does talk a lot about government, and I guess it's probably more minarchist than anything. But to me, it's based in like this anarchist principle of just, and it's not even anarchist. It's just the principle of freedom, and that was planned and written in bars and pubs around this city. And so I'm sitting there thinking about it. And as I'm thinking about it, I pull up my phone and I see a tweet from 2 minutes earlier from Maj that says the exact same damn thing. And I'm like, all right, yep, this is what's going on. And
Yeah,
so my thought is with all of this is, let's bring back freedom to the place where freedom was born in this country. And
absolutely.
and the more I'm starting to see stuff, the more hopeful I get. Like this was all originally born out of defiance, but the more I'm talking with people, the more hopeful I'm getting. And I'm like, we've got a chance here. We're at a tipping point. I think the opposition knows they're losing, and that's why they're coming down so heavy-handedly. And I've just been kind of saying it sort of flippantly. I think one day they're going to talk about 2022 the way they talked about 1776. And I want to see that happen. And one of the cool things that we're making that happen is we're coming together with other groups in and around the city. We had a call last night with 21 other people involved with probably 18 different organizations where we're planning a pack, planning a coalition, like an official coalition to come together and fight this on all fronts, social, legal, political, everywhere. So in a couple weeks, we don't have a date nailed down yet, but we're gonna hope to have a big rally here in Philly. Hopefully have somebody like Maj speak, a few others, get some big names out there, speak, rally. It's really gonna have to be a grassroots effort where we connect with people, and we get people to stand up and say no, because you can't comply your way out of tyranny. Um, and I think we have to. I think we have to show people that we're serious, because like you said, it's so easy for people to dismiss us, be like, oh, you're callous, you don't care. I had an uncle that I was very close to growing up, coached baseball teams of mine, hit me fly balls in my front yard for hours on end. He died in January 2020 of a mysterious respiratory illness, and he had blood clots in his lungs and eventually died of a stroke. What was it? You tell me. I had some lady today. I was on Facebook and I was posting things on Facebook because people fed up, and I was like, "Hey, we're doing something. Come join us." She said, "Well, you could be doing all this stuff in the city, instead you're wasting your time with this." And I was like, "You don't know what you're talking about. Like, Maj is doing more for this city than almost any other single human being." And as she was typing all this stuff, I had a member of our group text me and say, "Hey, what do you think? Would it be okay if I told the rest of the group if maybe we just did something to like go give homeless people coffee and maybe passed out some literature because it's really cold and I passed this homeless woman, she just wanted a hot cup of coffee." I'm like, "Bingo! That's exactly what we want to do." Because here we are having this restaurant in Fishtown saying one day saying you have to go around back to get your food if you want it, and the next day they made a post. Today they made a post. Today's been very cold in Philly, saying here we have hot soup. Come in from the cold, get it. Yeah, not if you're unvaccinated. What if you're unvaccinated and homeless? You're not going to get in there. So what are we going to do? I'll gladly go out in the cold and hand out coffee, hand out hot soup. Treat people with human dignity and show that, hey, I'm human and I care. And I don't know, maybe that will break the dissonance that's going on in some of these people's minds. Maybe not. I don't know. But
But I
yeah,
mean,
that's the
it's
kind of
it's
goal
yeah.
goal with the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's we all have a small part to play. Is the way I feel. It's like, and all of us have different giftings and callings, and I firmly believe that like, as much as guys like Dave Smith and Malice can wake a lot of people up, there's also people that get woken up through just like their friends or through
Mhm.
even just smaller interactions. Like, I mean, I kind of I'll credit Dave Smith for getting me to the door a
Yep.
lot when I talk about this stuff, but Dave Smith got me through the door, but it was really my friends that I met in the Mises Caucus that actually convinced me to finally like go through it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Dave Smith like introduced me to the world, and then it was the people in that world that actually like then got me immersed in it. There's something in what you were talking about that's like uh that really speaks to me and kind of like the journey I've been on with this podcast, because this podcast started out radically different. This project I'm doing started out radically differently than where it's ended up. I initially sought out to kind of want to reform the church. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying I've dropped that mission, but it's not become my only priority, I guess. One, because like when I saw the tyranny rising up, I was like, Christians should be doing more. Christians should be not submitting to the state. The churches should not be closing down services and submitting to the state. We shouldn't be waiting for permission to obey God and do what the Bible tells us to do and all that. And so I was like, wanting to speak out against that. And I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, because there are many individual examples of heroic pastors and Christians out there who have done that, done just that. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, I've been, I think, more often than not disappointed with the church here in America. Certainly, even in here in Pennsylvania, a lot of them have just
Mhm.
been all too happy to, just kind of, bend over and do exactly what the state says,
Yep.
and I hate that. But then sort of what you just talking about there, how like the revolution started in bars and pubs and stuff, and I found myself, despite the fact that I hate politics, I found myself drawn to the Mises Caucus and joining this group of ragtag, kind of not. I don't want to like paint with a broad brush there, but a lot of the Mises Caucus style libertarians, they're not your milk toast, lukewarm type. They're A lot of them are different backgrounds, but a lot of them are a bit more, I don't know, like rough around the edges, or I just like regular. I guess it's not even right. They're just not like predominantly like super liberal, like college elite type Americans. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Uh, there's more of like a blue collar, kind of mentality, which kind of reminds me of Philly, which kind of
Yep.
I'm a heretic. I live in Pennsylvania, but I'm a Baltimore sports fan. But despite all the sports rivalries and stuff, there's something that all those kind of cities kind of have in common, which is kind of like
Yep.
Pittsburgh, Philly, and Baltimore. Despite the sports rivalries, they share something in common, which is the fact that even though they're kind of big cities, uh, all cities have within their people this sort of like, I don't know, like they're not just, I don't know, like it's not Los Angeles, it's not New York. Like there's something about it that like they they pride themselves in kind of being like more of a, I think, blue collar kind of blue chip kind of people. And uh I've started to realize, I guess, over this past year of, year and a half of my podcast and this journey I've been on, that, you know, but when Jesus told his apostles to go out and to preach the gospel and to, be light and salt and to be fishers of men, that doesn't mean staying within the confines of the safety of church and
Yeah.
four walls.
Mm-mm.
You know what I mean? And that's not what fighting liberty should look like.
Mm-mm.
So as much as I want the church to be better, I've come to realize that, like, there's something very, even though it's a Misesian term, there's something very Christian about that phrase, take human action.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Oh
sitting on
yeah.
the sidelines and capitulating only does so much. And so I just felt compelled to get involved with this group of people because they're just, and what's special about them is that they're normal people. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And that's the amazing part, is that, you don't need to be some, like, I mean, that's what the revolution was, right? It was
Yep.
ordinary people. I mean, you don't need to be some, like, I don't know, like the most amazing intellectual. You don't need to be uh the most skilled person or the most rich person or the most connected person or the most influential person. Uh, it's actually better that you're a regular person who can just connect with other regular people, because for the most part we are all just regular people.
Yep.
And that's what has appeal, and that's where work gets done, and that's where, at least in, although I'm a, libertarian, I'm also a Christian. I think that's also where the actual work of, following after Christ and to do what you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me. Like, I've said this a lot over the past few months to other Christians, like, to be a light in the darkness, you have to be in the darkness.
Yep. Yep.
You have to go out into the world, and that means, like, you're gonna be put outside your comfort zone. You're gonna have to deal with some messy situations and broken people and broken situations that you can't find perfect answers to, because there are no perfect answers to things in this life. But there are clear cut directions that move towards what you want and that lead towards hell. You know what I
Yep.
mean? There are clear cut directions that lead towards heaven and lead towards God, that lead towards liberty, and those that lead towards the path of destruction. Like Jesus said, the path is uh, narrow for
Yep.
sometimes, but it's not unclear. So that's, what you said there. That's kind of why I like what you guys are doing there in Philly and why I want to support it, and that's kind of why, despite being a very radical, like, like, for the longest time I was like, anti-politics, voting is violence, like I don't want to
Yep.
be involved in anything to do with this kind of stuff. Uh but what you kind of talked about, that kind of helped me to, it gave me some more contextualization for, I guess, that little journey I've been on, and why I
Oh
think,
yeah.
what we're doing is meaningful and impactful. It's just those, in the like small interactions you have, conversations with people, the great work of liberty, I think, is done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm right there with you. I mean, the road is narrow, and that narrow road that Jesus walked led him to sweat blood in the garden.
Right.
Like, and I'm nowhere near sweating blood anywhere in my life. I'm too much too prideful and sinful at times to do that. But
I hear that.
some of this, I mean, to deal with this is wrestling. Like, I'm having to learn, what does it mean to turn the other cheek? What does it mean when Tolstoy keeps harping on, resist ye not evil? Um, I the biggest influences in my life the last couple of years, outside of the Bible itself, have been Dallas Willard's Divine Conspiracy, and then all of Tolstoy's writings. I'm eating up Tolstoy like nobody's business right now. But how do you deal with this? I read the Metaxas Bonhoeffer biography, and a lot of it just went into Bonhoeffer, like his personal struggles with how to combat Hitler. And we're not anywhere quite near that at this point. But like, yeah, how do you react to somebody basically telling you that they wish you're dead because you just made a different decision? And it's intense. Sometimes I wonder, should I even be doing this? Should I even be out here doing this? When Tolstoy is quoting Jesus and saying, "Resist ye not evil," should I just not be resisting at all? Should I just be out here, just kind of sitting back, letting it happen? I don't know.
Well, and
Tolstoy also
yeah.
said, yeah, he said, all doctrine that reveals the truth is chimerical to the blind. Am I blind? Like, I don't know.
And this is where, like, I love Tolstoy, but, like, I think that, you know, labels can be tricky.
Yeah,
I sort of identify as a pacifist in a sense,
yeah,
but for me, pacifism is not about, the more, like, dictionary definition of the, refusal to use force or violence, but
yeah,
rather what are you aimed at? I'm
yeah,
aimed at peace, and I'm aimed at not
yeah,
the destruction of my enemies, but
yeah,
rather blessing and loving my enemies, and now I also love my neighbor. So that means that for the good of my enemies and my neighbors and loving them, I want to, uh I want to over that's what Romans 12 say, overcome evil with good.
yep,
So I think, when you say resist, so Tolstoy says resist not evil, that's true. But the second part of that is you overcome evil with good.
yeah,
And that means, we don't become resentful. As hard as that
yeah.
is, we don't become resentful. We don't
That's a
get filled
struggle.
with hate. We don't, I'm right there with you. I'm a fallen son of
Yep,
Adam
me
who
too.
has fallen in that trap many times. But that's part of that wrestling, and there's something I think even commendable and something beautiful about humans that we struggle with hate, but we can
Yep,
still choose to love. And love is not just like a feeling. It doesn't mean like
yep,
I'm just like bubbling over with like ooey gooey feelings about you right now. It means
yep,
like, I mean, anyone that's been married knows that like there's times where like loving your spouse is a choice.
yeah,
It's not always natural. And
yep,
um so I think that I think and honestly, and I've gotten some shit from the maybe like more toxic part of the libertarian movement for saying this, but I really think that what the Mises Caucus is doing is that walking that hard line of not trying to overcome evil with evil, but trying to overcome evil with good.
yeah,
And it's a hard line. Doesn't mean that we walk it perfectly, but just because you can't do something perfectly doesn't mean that you should do nothing at all. Because the root of pacifism is not to be passive. Doesn't mean roll over and die. It
yep,
means the root of pacifism is to pacify, which means to bring peace. And that's what we're
yep,
trying to do. We're trying to bring peace. And
yep,
peace can only come through confronting people with the truth and confronting evil with good. And
yeah.
that's all I know what to do and all we can continue to do, I think.
The only person that's ever walked that line without tripping over it is Jesus himself, and
Exactly.
that's why we need grace and mercy on both sides of that
Absolutely.
line.
100%. Hey, this was a great conversation. I
Yeah,
really appreciate you coming on. So it's don'ttreadonphilly.com is where people can find out more on this.
Yeah, that's number one, the easiest place to get to us because it's got links to everything else and our friends. And yeah, I agree. I love the chat. Definitely have more things to love to chat with you about in the future if all this other stuff
For
goes
sure. For
like
sure.
dies down if it ever does.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, hey,
So
keep fighting the good fight. We're right there with you, and I'll have to try to make it out to Philly one of these days for one of these events. You're not too far from me, so.
sounds good.
Thanks again for coming on. We'll definitely do it again sometime, and thanks everybody for watching. And remember, until next time, don't fear the fire.